tell you all about what is the difference between undergraduate and graduate school. I think so, to a large extent, undergraduate and graduate school, or an undergraduate and graduate program of some degree, is that there is a large extent that it is just an extension of a graduate school program is just an extension of an undergraduate program. However, there are some really big things or really big differences, and I'll get into those in a minute. In particular, the why I'm suggesting that it's an extension, because you're building on knowledge, right? So you can imagine grade 1 or first grade is an extension of kindergarten, second grade is an extension of first grade, yada, 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 all the way up until you're in graduate school where you're building on this knowledge, right? So that's the idea behind science. I consider myself a social scientist. And that's the idea behind it, is that you're just building on knowledge on top of everything else until you have this big body of knowledge in your brain, right? That is sticking in your brain, right in there. So anyways, and that's what you're trying to do as you're going, right? You're building knowledge, you're building a career, a trajectory, and moving forward. So that's the general idea of the similarities, but they are vastly different in a lot of different ways. So what are the key differences between undergraduate and graduate school? The first one I'd like to point out, and I actually have a video on this. Oh, by the way, this is part of my thesis help series where I put out work. If you're interested in getting into graduate school and dealing with stuff in graduate school and becoming a PhD and all that kind of stuff, that's what this is about. So every Friday, if you look back every 7 days, right, there will be a video about graduate school, all sorts of stuff. So I put one about uncertainty. So this is the first thing the key difference. I personally think the key difference between a graduate and an undergraduate program is you're going to be feeling extremely uncertain in a graduate program. You're not going to know. It's going to be a lot more. You're making stuff up a lot more along the way. So it's really, really self-directed in that you are guiding your research trajectory. You are trying to figure out what to do. So research directory or trajectory is just you're writing stuff or investigating something. You're going back to when you're in second grade where you have to do a science fair project. And your science fair project is you going out and actually investigating something, but you're doing this in a rigorous way. Compared to when you're in an undergraduate program, you're taking primarily courses, right? So so some graduate programs are primarily course-based. So this would be a master's program. So an MBA, a master's of nursing, any of those kind of things like that. PA for physician assistants, any of that stuff is very, very course-based, and there's not really a component of research. Some master's programs have a little component of research where you have to do research for a year, which is actually good to understand what it's like to get into, a PhD program, which is really focused on doing research. So, that's the key thing the key thing between sort of a master's program that's focused on courses is that you're just going to be learning more knowledge. It truly is an extension of undergraduate program at that point. You're just learning more about a particular area. A research program, which is a master's research program or a PhD, is you're getting out there and you're actually getting your hands dirty and figuring things out that nobody else has explored before. It really is this thing where you're self-directed and you're going back to second grade and you have to go through and sort of investigate things, right? You're kind of being Dora the Explorer and finding things out that nobody else has found. So it's really fun in some ways, but it's really, really uncertain. You don't know what you're doing a lot of ways. So it's really, really the research part, and that's everything with a graduate program, is you just don't know what you're doing a lot of the time, and that's what you have to cope with. So there's a whole bunch of behavioral stuff you have to sort of think about. I won't get too much into that. Second thing is that the courses that you're taking in a graduate program are way harder than an undergraduate program. And they are particularly a PhD program. So any PhD program, you can imagine that the courses you're taking are 2 to 3 times harder than a undergraduate, one undergraduate course, right? So you imagine that it's basically 2 to 3 times an undergraduate course if you're taking a graduate course to some degree. Again, if you're taking a non-research thing, right, an MBA, then they're a little bit harder. The courses are a little bit harder, but not substantially harder. But in a PhD program, they're really hard. So you can only take a couple of courses, maybe 3 courses, and that would be a full course load, 3 or 4 courses, and you would feel very overwhelmed doing that. The third thing, when you're getting into graduate school, compared to an undergraduate program, in an undergraduate program, there's a lot of status between the professor, status difference between the professor and the undergraduate students. You're like, oh, professor so-and-so. It's not that way when you get into a PhD or research program and graduate school. You are working side by side with your professor and sort of doing research. You're doing much more of an apprentice role. You're trying to figure things out with that professor and trying to explore things with that professor, right? So it's a lot more informal. There is a lot of communication that happens. You're going to be talking to them. For me, I became very good friends with my professors, and first thing you'll know, which is a strange thing, most schools, you'll talk to your professor by their first name, and you call your professors. Once you get into a PhD program or a research sort of program, you're going to be calling your professors by their first names. The fourth thing is that the graduate school is a heck of a lot more frustrating than undergraduate. Research is really hard and you don't know what you're doing. You're being really frustrated along the way, and you are going to feel really lost. And it's really common, and it's okay, it's very, very common to get depressed in a graduate program and to go through those emotions of depression and stuff because you're figuring things out. Nobody else is doing that. Nobody else in the world is doing the thing you're doing when you're in a graduate program. And you have to figure out how to deal with that, right? And so one thing we do know from sociological research is Durkheim is his professor from a long time ago. Was interested in sort of depression and suicide and all that sort of negative stuff. And he was saying that the sort of less connected you feel to other people, the more likely you're going to feel depressed. And that's clearly what happens with a graduate program. So if you can create a surrounding and you can create a setting where you feel a lot more comfortable, that could really, where you have friends and stuff like that, that could really help out your graduate program and graduate experience compared to the undergraduate experience. But inevitably, almost everybody goes through that sort of feeling of depression. It truly is. The fifth thing, it's not a partying thing, right? You're with different people. The sort of undergraduate party scene, that kind of dies out relatively quickly. That might definitely will happen if you do an MBA or kind of a coursework sort of graduate school program. But in a sort of research program, within a couple of years, that sort of mentality of getting smashed on every weekend and doing all that kind of stuff, that really peters out very, very quickly. And you'll find out that it's just not part of the experience. Obviously people do party and all that kind of stuff, but it's less of the experience than when in a undergraduate program. So don't expect that. If you're expecting graduate school is just be an extension of a party, not going to happen. And we're going to expect you, as professors, we're going to expect you to start behaving much more sort of responsible along the way. And that's just life, right? You're growing up. Sixth thing is it's really collaborative in a lot of ways. You're going to be working a lot more. Graduate school is a lot more collaborative than undergraduate. This is a key difference with an undergrad and graduate school program. Is really collaborative a lot of ways, but at the same time you're working a lot on your own. So you're collaborative in the sense you're working on a sort of a group project, a big group project, but you're working on your own a lot. So you just gotta get used to that. The seventh thing is that in undergraduate program compared to a graduate program is that people are extremely smart, but nobody knows what they're doing, right? So in a graduate program, they are extremely smart. Everybody around you has gone through the hurdles, especially if you go to a good school. People have gone through all the hurdles to get there. They're smart in undergrad. They were smart in high school. In general, they're just really smart. But then once they get there, people get lost. And it doesn't matter how smart you are. Some people are more productive than others just because they have the sort of behavioral skills. They can get up and do work every single day and be okay with that. And they can work for hours and hours and hours and be okay with that. Compared to other people that are really smart, and they just can't get their work done for whatever reason, right? Sixth thing is, or actually, where am I? Eighth thing, eighth thing is that there is grades for in undergrad. They matter a heck of a lot. In grad school, they really don't matter a lot. Nobody's going to really ask you about your grades. So again, in a sort of coursework MBA style or a master's of nursing, for example, they do matter. They matter a lot in those sort of situations. But if you're doing research, and you're kind of doing the graduate school research program compared to an undergraduate program, they don't really matter that much. We don't care about that. What matters is the output that you have. So what does your research look like? And if you have good grades, then your research is probably going to be good, and you could publish a lot along the way. But in general, they're not really correlated that strongly. So we're more worried about whether you can actually do good research and write papers. Number 9, there's going to be a lot more focus on a lot more focus in graduate school on theory, and you're not going to know what that is just at this moment if you're watching this video. But as you move through the process, you're going to understand a little bit more what that is. So if you're in an undergraduate program, I'd highly recommend that you take some theory courses to get that feel of what that is. You're probably going to learn a lot, but they're going to be stinking hard. Compared to other programs and stuff like that. So that's all we care about in graduate school is theory. All the other sort of stuff, we consider it really fluff. And it, it really doesn't matter. So that's what we're really very, very concerned about. And the 10th thing that I think is really important, there we go, 10, right? The 10th thing is that it's going to take you a lot longer doing any sort of research graduate school program compared to an undergraduate program. An undergraduate program, you're guaranteed to do it in 4 years if you're somewhat of a decent student. If you're taking more than 4 years, it's like, probably you shouldn't be going to graduate school. So if you take 4 years, unless you have, so for me, I actually took 5 years, but that's the way that the program is actually set up. So University of Waterloo, Canada does, it's a 5-year program, but you work for 2.5 years during the program. So it's actually pretty intensive. Anyways, I digress. So with the sort of a graduate program, it's 4 years. You're guaranteed 4 years. You're done. You're out, and you know exactly what it's going to take. Graduate program, particularly with research, MBA is really, exactly what it's going to take. It's going to be 2 years or a year or whatever it is, and you're done, right? Because it's coursework. It's just, you're just memorizing more stuff or learning more stuff. But a research program, a PhD, graduate school, which is traditional, what we think of graduate school, that's going to take you a heck of a lot longer you think it's going to take, and it's going to cost you a lot more money than you think it's going to take. So make sure you do some great financial planning and thinking through whether this is actually going to be for you. For me, I thought it was going to take 4 years to get this thing done. I was a really smart kid and all that kind of stuff. I thought that, I blasted through all this other stuff. No, it took me 7 years. To get a job and stuff like that. Because you need to get research publications to get a job if you're doing a PhD route. That's the only way that you get a job. And so it took me that long to actually get something done. Where it was good enough. And so it doesn't matter what field you're in, that's going to be kind of the norm, is anywhere between 5 to 8 years to once you do the research route. So, and that might be you do 4 years or 3 years, 3 to 4 years of a PhD program, and then you go and do postdocs for a couple of years. But generally, by the time you're actually a professor and you're working in that route, and you're kind of a really true, or, maybe you are a biotech person, chemistry person, you want to work for Genentech, for example, still going to take you that long to get into the postdocs and things like that to actually get that done. So that's all I wanted to tell you. Those are the key differences between undergraduate and graduate school. There's probably a lot more than I'm neglecting. Make sure you do give me a thumbs up if you like this. Do appreciate it, as well as subscribe to the channel. So that's it. Take care. Have a wonderful day, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye.